The ships descended from the stars, massive and gleaming. They filled Earth's skies like metal clouds. People pointed and stared. Some ran in fear. Others stood frozen in wonder. These were the vessels of the Galactic Concord, the oldest alliance of advanced beings in the known universe. Todd Park watched from his apartment window in Seoul. His hands gripped the windowsill until his knuckles turned white. "They're earlier than expected," he whispered to himself. His phone buzzed with emergency alerts, but he already knew what they said. The exile was beginning today. 3 months ago, the Concord had made their declaration. Humanity was developing too quickly. They called Earth a potential threat to galactic stability. Their solution was simple and cruel: relocation of the entire human species to a distant, resource-poor system called Terminus. Ta's work as an aerospace engineer had given him advanced knowledge of the coming exile. He had tried to prepare his family, but how could anyone truly prepare for something like this? The building shook as smaller Concorde ships landed in the streets. Ta grabbed his pre-packed bag and ran to find his wife Sue and their daughter Min. "Stay close," he told them as they joined the crowds being herded toward the transport ships. Concorde peacekeepers, tall, four-armed beings with smooth gray skin, directed the flow of humans with glowing batons. Admiral Jum Kim had gone to plead humanity's case one last time. The Concorde Council had granted her an audience, but Ta knew it was just for show. The decision had been made. Humanity had no say in its own fate. The family moved slowly with the crowd. People wept openly. Some prayed. Others shouted in anger. The peacekeepers remained unmoved. "Why are they doing this, Dad?" Min asked, her small hand tight in his. Ta knelt down. "They're afraid of what we might become," he explained simply. "But they don't know how strong we really are." A sudden surge in the crowd separated them. Ta felt Min's hand slip from his. "Min," he shouted. "Sue." The crowd pushed him forward. The peacekeepers blocked his attempts to turn back. "My family," Tay yelled. "Please, I've lost my family." The peacekeeper stared with 6 unblinking eyes. "All humans will be relocated. You will be reunited at Terminus." But Ta knew better. With billions being moved across light years, families would be scattered. Many would never find each other again. The transport ship was cold and cramped. Humans sat shoulder to shoulder on metal benches. There were no windows. Ta spent the journey staring at the photo of Sue and Min on his phone until the battery died. The journey took weeks. People got sick. Some died. The Concorde provided just enough food and water to keep most alive. They didn't care about comfort. When the doors finally opened, Ta stepped out onto the soil of a new world. The sky was a dull orange. The air felt thin. This was Terminus Prime, the main planet in humanity's prison system. "Welcome to your new home," a mechanized voice announced. "The Concorde thanks you for your cooperation." Ta laughed bitterly at this. Cooperation. They had been given no choice. The first days were chaos. Tai searched every new arrival group for his family. He showed their picture to anyone who would look. No one had seen them. At night, lying on the hard ground of the hastily built shelter, Ta stared at the unfamiliar stars. Earth was out there somewhere, quarantined behind an impenetrable barrier. The Concorde had promised that the planet would be preserved. But for what? As a museum. A reminder of their power. A week after arrival, news spread through the settlement. Admiral Kim's ship had returned from the failed diplomatic mission. People gathered to hear her speak. Kim looked exhausted, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes hollow. "The Concorde will not reconsider," she announced to the crowd. "But they have underestimated us. They think this exile will break our spirit. It will not." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some shouted in anger, others in despair. "Today we begin building," Kim continued. "Not just shelters and farms, but a new society. The Concorde expects us to die here. We will disappoint them." That night, Ta volunteered for the engineering course. If he couldn't find his family, He would at least help build a world where they could survive if they were alive. The work was hard. Terminus had few accessible metals. Water was scarce. But Todd discovered that the planet's unusual radiation patterns affected energy fields in unexpected ways. This knowledge led to his first breakthrough, a more efficient water extraction system. Months passed. Settlements grew. Hope began to replace despair, slowly, like the tough native plants that humans discovered could be farmed. Tai never stopped searching for Sue and Min. Every new transport arrival brought renewed hope and renewed pain. 1 year after the exile began, Ta stood on a hill overlooking the main settlement. What had started as tents was now becoming a real town. Engineers like him were finding ways to use the limited resources of Terminus. Doctors were developing treatments for the new diseases they faced. They meant this as our end, Ta said to the orange sky. But it will be our beginning. He touched the photo of his family that he kept in his pocket. I will find you, he promised. And together, we will show the galaxy what humanity can truly become. Below, the lights of the settlement began to glow as night fell. Humanity, exiled but unbroken, continued to survive. 3 years had passed since the exile. Terminus was still a harsh world, but humans had proven themselves harder to break than the Galactic Concord expected. Todd Park wiped sweat from his forehead as he examined the new mining drill. The device was ugly, built from salvaged parts and makeshift tools, but it worked better than anyone could have hoped. It could extract rare minerals from the deep rock layers that previous methods couldn't reach. Run the test again, he told his assistant. The young man nodded and restarted the sequence. The drill whirred to life, cutting through the sample rock like it was butter. Tai allowed himself a small smile. This would help solve their resource shortage, at least for a while. Every small victory mattered. His team had set up their testing facility in what was now called New Sol, one of the largest settlements on Terminus Prime. What had started as emergency shelters had grown into a real city, with permanent buildings and organized systems. Engineer Park, a voice called. Todd turned to see a messenger running toward him. The council wants you immediately. The council chamber was a simple room with a round table. Admiral Jum Kim sat at its head, now the elected leader of the Terran Alliance. The unified government formed in exile. Her hair had gone completely gray, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. We've found something, she said as Tai entered. Something that might change everything. A woman stood by a display screen. Todd recognized her as Mina Lee, a physicist who worked with the unique radiation patterns of the Terminus system. Engineer Park, Mina nodded to him. Your mining sensors picked up unusual energy readings. My team investigated and found this. She activated the screen, showing a swirling pattern of light. What am I looking at? Tai asked. A dimensional anomaly, Mina explained. The radiation here affects space-time differently than in other systems. It creates thin spots between dimensions. Tai's mind raced with possibilities. Could this be used for faster travel? Communication? Potentially more, Mina said, her eyes bright with excitement. If we can harness this, we might eventually find a way past the Concord's barriers. Hope surged through Ta. For 3 years, he had never stopped searching for his wife and daughter. Each new transport arrival brought the same disappointment. If they were still alive, they were somewhere else in the Terminus system, perhaps on one of the other colony planets or moons. How long until you have something practical? Admiral Kim asked. Years, at least, Mina admitted. But it's the first real possibility we found. Their meeting was interrupted by alarms. Unidentified ship approaching, came the announcement over the speakers. They rushed to the defense center. On the main screen, a small vessel was descending toward the outskirts of New Sol. It wasn't human-made, nor did it match the sleek designs of Concord ships. It's damaged, the sensor operator reported, moving erratically. Prepare defense teams, Kim ordered, but hold fire unless attacked. Ta joined the response team that approached the crashed ship. Smoke rose from its hull where it had skidded across the rocky ground. The hatch suddenly opened. Tai and the others raised their makeshift weapons, mostly mining tools converted for defense. A creature stumbled out. It was humanoid but clearly alien, with blue-tinged skin and 4 small horns on its head. It collapsed onto the ground. "We need a medic," Ta called, rushing forward despite the risk. Hours later, the alien sat in a secure room, drinking water through a straw. Its wounds had been treated as best they could with human medical knowledge. "I am Do," it said in broken human language. "Traitor. Smuggler sometimes. How do you speak our language?" Tai asked, fascinated. "Concord translation tech." Do tapped a device on its neck. "I trade with many species. Why are you here?" Admiral Kim asked. "The Terminus system is supposed to be off-limits to all non-Concord ships." Do made a sound like laughter. "Off-limits means good profit for smugglers. Was not expecting to find humans thriving." "What do you mean?" Ta leaned forward. "Concord says humans dying out here. Tells other species not to worry about the dangerous Earth beings anymore." Do's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "They are watching you, expecting you to fade away." Anger rippled through the room. Their exile had been cruel enough, but to spread lies about their demise. "What do they trade in this sector?" Minna asked suddenly. "The Concord ships we occasionally detect." "Resources," Do said. "Terminus has unique elements, valuable for certain technologies." Tai and Minna exchanged looks. The same radiation patterns they were studying might be what the Concord valued in this system. They had exiled humans to a seemingly worthless place that actually contained something precious. Over the next few days, they learned much from Do. The smuggler shared information about nearby systems, Concord patrol patterns, and most importantly, news that the mighty alliance was not as stable as it appeared. Several species were growing unhappy with the dominant influence of the Bek, who controlled the Concord's leadership. "This changes our planning," Admiral Kim said in a private meeting with Tai and Minna. "If the Concord is fracturing from within, there might be potential allies for us out there. First, we need to be able to reach them," Minna pointed out. "My team will redouble our efforts on the dimensional research." Ta nodded. "And will increase resource production. If we're going to build a future beyond Terminus, we'll need everything we can get." As he walked back to his workshop, Ta looked up at the orange sky. For the first time since arriving on this harsh world, he felt something more than just determination to survive. He felt hope. "We're coming back," he whispered to the stars. "And when we do, the galaxy will see what humanity has become." 20 years had passed since humanity's exile to Terminus. What began as refugee camps had transformed into thriving cities with their own unique architecture designed for the harsh environment. Protective domes shielded larger settlements from Terminus Prime's frequent radiation storms. Most impressive was New Sol, now home to over 2 million people. Tapark's hair had turned completely white, but his mind remained sharp as ever. He stood in the central laboratory, watching as Mina Lee made final adjustments to the device they had spent decades perfecting. "Is it ready?" Tai asked. Minna nodded, her face showing both excitement and concern. "The phase shift generator is operational. According to our tests, it should create a temporary dimensional pocket that can bypass the Concord's barrier systems." The laboratory team gathered around. This moment represented 20 years of research, countless failures, and the combined brilliance of humanity's best scientific minds. The device itself looked deceptively simple, a silver cylinder with glowing blue rings. "If this works," Ta said quietly, "everything changes." Admiral Kim, now in her 70s but still commanding respect as the Alliance's leader, entered the lab with Commander Hyun Kang. Hyun was the chosen pilot for the first mission beyond Terminus, a hardened military officer who had grown up entirely in exile. "Are we ready to make history?" Admiral Kim asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," Minna replied. "The scout ship has been equipped with the phase shift technology. If it works, Hyun will be able to slip past the Concorde's detection systems and visit the Proxima system. They moved to the launch facility, where a small, sleek vessel waited. Unlike the crude machines of their early exile years, this ship represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity under pressure. It incorporated the unique properties of terminus radiation that Minna had discovered long ago. Hyun performed the final pre-flight checks. 20 years ago, they thought they'd ended our story, he said. Today we start a new chapter. The scout ship lifted off smoothly, rising into Terminus Prime's orange sky. From the control center, Ta, Mina, and Admiral Kim watched its progress on the monitors. Approaching barrier zone, Han's voice came through the comms. Activating phase shift drive in 3, 2, 1. The screen showed a flash of blue light, then nothing. The ship had vanished. Did it work? Admiral Kim asked, her voice tense. Mina checked her instruments. All readings nominal. He's passed through the barrier. The control room erupted in cheers. After 20 years of imprisonment, humanity had found the key to their cage. For the next week, everyone in the Alliance waited anxiously. The mission plan called for Hyun to spend 3 days gathering intelligence before returning. When day 5 passed with no signal, worry set in. Could the Concorde have captured him? Ta asked during an emergency council meeting. If they did, they'd have come here by now, Admiral Kim reasoned. Something else is happening. On the 8th day, sensors detected an energy signature matching their phase shift technology. Hyun was returning, but he wasn't alone. 2 additional ships accompanied him, designs unknown to their database. The control center was chaos. Defense systems activated automatically. Should we consider this a threat? Asked the security chief. Hold fire, Admiral Kim ordered. Let's see what Commander Kang brings us. The 3 ships landed at the designated area outside New Seoul. Armed guards surrounded the site as Hyun emerged from his vessel, looking exhausted but unharmed. From the other ships came aliens. Tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors in the sunlight. They raised empty hands in the universal gesture of peace. Admiral, Hyun said, saluting. I bring representatives of the Lumi resistance. They'd been fighting against Bach control of the Concorde for decades. One of the aliens stepped forward. I am Du, speaker for the Lumi Coalition. We come seeking alliance with humanity. In the secure meeting chamber, Du explained what Hyun had discovered during his exploration. The mighty Concorde was fracturing from within. The Bach species, who had engineered humanity's exile, maintained control through manipulation and force. Several species had formed underground resistance movements. We have monitored your progress for years, Du explained. When your ship appeared suddenly in Proxima, we knew you had achieved something remarkable. Why did the Bach want us exiled? Tai asked the question that had haunted him for 20 years. Because you are unique, Du replied. Human minds process information differently than any known species. Your creativity, your ability to make intuitive leaps. The Bach scientists discovered this trait and feared it. In a few generations, you would have surpassed them. Admiral Kim leaned forward. So our exile wasn't about protection of the galaxy. It was about protecting Bach dominance. Precisely, Du confirmed. And they have told the galaxy that humanity has perished here, unable to survive Terminus. Your thriving civilization would shock the Concorde worlds. Mina had been quiet until now. Our phase shift technology, she said. It could change the balance of power, couldn't it? Beyond question, Du replied. The ability to bypass Bach barrier systems would give the resistance a tremendous advantage. That night, the council debated long into the night. The revelation of Bach deception had awakened old anger, but it also presented opportunity. We can use the phase shift technology to free Earth, Tai argued passionately. We can show the galaxy that humanity didn't just survive. We flourished despite everything they did to us. Admiral Kim nodded slowly. After 20 years, it's time for humanity to return to the stars. not seeking revenge, but justice. As dawn broke over New Seoul, the decision was made. Operation Homecoming would begin planning immediately. Humanity would build a fleet using their breakthrough technology. Tai stood at the window, watching the sunrise. All these years, he had continued searching passenger records for his wife and daughter. He had never found them. But now, perhaps, if Earth could be liberated, there might be answers waiting there. "We're coming home," he whispered. The Terran Alliance shipyards had never seen such activity. For 6 months after Commander Hyun's successful mission, they worked day and night. A fleet was taking shape. Over 200 vessels equipped with phase shift technology. Each ship represented a miracle of engineering born from 20 years of exile. Ta Park supervised the installation of the phase shift drives. At 73, his body moved slower, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. This was the culmination of his life's work since the exile. "Final checks complete on the flagship," reported a young engineer. Ta nodded with satisfaction. The flagship, named Homecoming, was their greatest achievement. Larger than any other vessel, it would carry Admiral Kim and a command team. The plan for Operation Homecoming was bold. Rather than sending a concentrated force to one location, the fleet would split into smaller groups. They would appear simultaneously at key points throughout Concord space, demonstrating humanity's return to the galactic stage. "Are you nervous?" Minna asked, joining Tai on the observation deck. Her once black hair was now streaked with silver, her face lined with the years of hard work. "Not nervous," Tai replied. "Ready." Admiral Kim addressed the fleet commanders one final time before launch. Though now in her 80s, her presence still commanded respect. For 20 years, the Concorde has told the galaxy that humanity died in exile, she said, her voice strong. "Today, we show them how wrong they were. We return not seeking revenge, but justice, not just for ourselves, but for all species oppressed by the Vike." The launch sequence began at dawn. Ship after ship rose from Terminus Prime into the orange sky. From the Homecoming's bridge, Todd watched as the fleet assembled in orbit. "Phase shift drives ready," reported the chief engineer. Admiral Kim took her command chair. "All ships, prepare for phase shift. Operation Homecoming begins now." Across the fleet, the blue rings of the phase shift drives activated. In an instant, the ships vanished from Terminus space. The Homecoming reappeared near Centauri Prime, one of the Concorde's most important worlds. Alarms immediately blared throughout the ship. "Concorde defense platforms detecting us," called the sensor officer. "They're powering weapons. Open all communication channels," ordered Admiral Kim. "Broadcast our message." Her face appeared on screens across the Centauri system. "This is Admiral Jum Kim of the Terran Alliance. Humanity has returned from exile. We come to reveal the truth about the Bach deception and to reclaim our rightful place among the stars." The initial response was confusion. The Concorde ships hesitated, unsure how to respond to vessels that shouldn't exist, using technology they didn't understand. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared at trading hubs, military outposts, and diplomatic centers. Each broadcast the same message. Humanity had not only survived, they had flourished. On Centauri Prime, the Concorde commander finally responded. "Terran vessel, you are in violation of Concorde quarantine. Power down and prepare to be boarded." "I think not," Admiral Kim replied calmly. "Your sensors can detect our weapons capabilities. We don't wish to use them, but we will defend ourselves." The Concorde commander's image showed clear shock. The human ships possessed technology that their scans couldn't fully analyze, the benefit of 20 years of development in isolation. "We request an audience with the Concorde Council," Kim continued. "The time for lies is over." Word spread quickly. On dozens of worlds, the impossible news traveled. The exiled humans had returned. Many didn't believe it until they saw the feeds of human ships hovering above major cities. The Lumi resistance seized the moment of confusion. As planned, They launched simultaneous uprisings on 6 worlds, revealing the full extent of back manipulation. Taz's heart raced as reports flooded in from across the fleet. The Bak were scrambling to respond, but their carefully constructed system of control was cracking. 3 days after their dramatic return, the human delegation stood before the emergency session of the Concord Council. Admiral Kim, supported by Tai and Nina, faced the representatives of 50 species. The Bak counselors sat at the center, their pale faces showing both fury and fear. For 20 years, the Concord has been told that humanity perished in exile, Admiral Kim began. This lie, perpetrated by the Bak leadership, was designed to hide the truth, that they feared our potential. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives looked shocked, others unsurprised. The evidence is clear, Kim continued. Documents provided by the Lumi resistance show the systematic suppression of multiple species whose development threatened Bak dominance. The head bug counselor stood. These humans developed forbidden technology to escape their lawful quarantine. They must be contained again, with greater force this time. A Lumi representative responded. The phase shift technology violates no Concord law. It merely exposed the barriers that the Bak built without full council authorization. The debate raged for hours. But the Bak had miscalculated badly. The sight of human ships appearing throughout Concord space had demonstrated power that couldn't be ignored. And the evidence of Bak manipulation had confirmed suspicions many species had harbored for years. Outside the council chamber, Tai received an urgent message from the homecoming. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures near Earth. The Bak are moving to reinforce the quarantine barrier. Tai rushed to inform Admiral Kim during a recess. They're trying to ensure we can't reach Earth, he explained. They know that's our true goal. Kim's eyes narrowed. Then we move up our timetable. Contact Commander Hyun. The Earth liberation begins now. As the council returned to session, news arrived that rocked even the Bak representatives. A human battle group had appeared in Earth orbit. The quarantine barrier had fallen. After 25 years of exile, humanity had come home. The battle for Earth lasted only 3 days. The Bak forces that had maintained the quarantine barrier for 25 years found themselves outmatched by human phase shift technology. Where Concord ships relied on brute force and traditional weapons, the Terran fleet used surgical precision and unpredictable tactics. Commander Hyun led the main assault, his ships appearing and disappearing across Earth orbit in patterns that confused Bak targeting systems. By the 3rd day, the last Concord vessels retreated, leaving Earth's skies clear for the first time in a quarter century. Todd Park stood on the bridge of the homecoming as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Below, the blue oceans and green continents of humanity's homeworld grew larger. Tears filled his eyes. Beautiful, isn't it? Admiral Kim said, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd see it again. The ship landed outside what had once been Seoul. The city had been preserved in a strange, frozen state. Buildings intact but empty, streets clean but silent. The Concord had maintained Earth as a museum piece, a reminder of their power over the species they had exiled. As Ta walked on Earth's soil for the first time in 25 years, he felt both joy and sadness. This was home, but not as he remembered it. And somewhere on this planet, he had lost his wife and daughter during the chaotic days of exile. News of Earth's liberation spread throughout the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, oppressed species rose up against Bak control. The carefully constructed hierarchy of the Concord was collapsing. 10 days after Earth's liberation, the Concord Council convened an emergency session. The chamber looked markedly different now. Many Bak representatives had been removed, replaced by members of the species they had once dominated. Admiral Kim sat with the human delegation, her posture straight despite her years. The evidence against the former Bak leadership is undeniable, announced the council speaker, a Lumi elder named Ra. Their systematic suppression of developing species violated our founding principles. The trial of the back leaders had been swift. Documents provided by the Resistance proved decades of manipulation and secret biological research aimed at maintaining their dominance. With this dark chapter behind us, we must look to a new future, continued Ra. The old Concord can no longer stand. In its place, we propose the formation of a new alliance, the Galactic Covenant. Over the next weeks, representatives from all species, including humanity, worked to draft the Covenant's charter. At its heart was a simple principle: no species would dominate another. Technological and cultural exchange would be encouraged, not suppressed. While diplomats worked, Ta focused on a more personal mission. He had returned to his old neighborhood in Seoul, now being slowly reoccupied by returning humans. The apartment building where he had lived still stood, preserved like everything else. He spent days searching records that had been left behind during the exile. Finally, in a database from a processing center, he found something: a transport manifest listing Sue and Min Park as relocated to Terminus Delta, the farthest moon in the Terminus system. They might still be alive, he told Mina when she visited him. All these years, they were in the same system, just on another world. Mina squeezed his hand. The first civilian transports to Terminus leave tomorrow. Go find them, old friend. The return journey to Terminus felt different than the forced exile of 25 years before. The ship was comfortable, the passengers hopeful. Many were like Ta, seeking family separated during the chaotic relocation. Terminus Delta was the smallest colony, a mining outpost with barely 50,000 inhabitants. The settlement clung to the surface of the barren moon, its buildings half buried for protection from radiation. Tay's hands shook as he approached the colony's central record office. "I'm looking for Sue and Min Park," he told the clerk. They would have arrived during the initial exile period. The clerk checked the database. Min Park is listed as a teacher at the central school. No record of Sue Park after the first decade. Tay's heart both soared and sank. His daughter was alive, but Sue, had she not survived the harsh early years? The school was a simple building near the colony center. Classes had just ended when Tay arrived. A woman in her 30s was arranging materials on a desk, her back to the door. "Min," Ta said softly. She turned. Her face, so like her mother's, showed shock, then disbelief. "Father," she whispered. They embraced, both weeping. 25 years of separation collapsed in an instant. Later, sitting in Min's small home, she told him about their life. "Mother survived the first 12 years, she explained. "She never stopped believing you would find us. The radiation sickness took her before the medical advances came." Ta nodded slowly, grief and gratitude mixing in his heart. "And you survived. You built a life here." "I did," Min smiled. "And now I have a daughter of my own." She pointed to a picture on the wall, a young girl with Sue's eyes. "Her name is June, after the Admiral. Everyone in the colonies knows her story." 3 months later, Tai stood on the observation deck of the new Covenant headquarters, built in orbit around a neutral star. Below him, representatives of 30 species gathered for the signing ceremony. Earth's delegation was led by Admiral Kim, frail now but determined to see the new era begin. Beside Ta stood Min and his granddaughter June. On the child's other side was a young buck child, part of the reconciliation program that brought children of former enemies together. As they watched, the 2 children held hands and placed them on the soil of a small planter. Together, they pressed a seed into the earth, the beginning of a tree that would grow as the new alliance grew. "What happens now?" June asked, looking up at her grandfather. Tai smiled. "Now we build something better than what came before. Not just for humans, but for everyone." Below, the Galactic Covenant was born. Humanity had returned to the stars, not seeking dominance but partnership. Exiled and broken, they had become stronger than ever imagined. And in doing so, had changed the galaxy forever.